it is a great pleasure for me to introduce our invited speaker today, who is going to enlighten us with his presentation about the art of idea pitching. So idea pitching is something that all of the students who are here should be deeply interested because of your upcoming assessments on idea pitching, as well as the need to enhance your oral presentation skills. So having spent around 40 years and in 8 different countries, such as the UK, Barbados, Portugal, Brunei Darussalam, United Arab Emirates, Australia, Malaysia, and even Singapore, our speaker has held various teaching and academic responsibilities and is no stranger to delivering effective oral presentations to international audience. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Paul Cabell, the Coordinator of English Language Development at Curtin University, Australia.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Narita. I'm going to share my screen with everyone. And hopefully you can now see my first slide. Can I just check with Dr. Narita? Is that visible?
Yeah, your title slide.
Great. Well, hello everyone. My name is Dr. Paul Cabell, as you have just been told, and I am the Coordinator of English Language Development here at Curtin University in Western Australia. Yes, I have had a wonderful professional life traveling around the world, and 6 years of which was living in Malaysia, in both Penang and Kuala Lumpur. And I have to say that Malaysia is my second favorite place in the world to live after Australia. So let's have a look at pitching. I'm going to have an assistant working with me through these slides, and this is Patsy. She's one of my students, and you will see her as we progress through the program, through the slides. So what am I going to talk about? Obviously an introduction that we're in at the moment, how to prepare and the ideas around what pitching is and why, elements for a perfect pitch, pitching a product idea or policy. We're going to have a look at how we use our body language, our facial expressions in enhancing our presentation, using our voice effectively. Also, how we can integrate visuals into our presentation, and of course, a conclusion. Right, let's get on. Why? Why do we pitch? Well, simply because we've got to get an idea across to an audience. We want our audience to buy into what we have to sell. And I'm not saying this in an economic way. It could be concept, an idea. And we will be pitching to potential investors, customers, partners, colleagues. And we want to persuade them to understand and accept our vision, what we want to say, what we want to do. This could be a product, it could be a service, it could be a concept, it could be an idea. But overall, we want to generate this understanding and this excitement that we are portraying to our audience. We want you to buy into what we have to offer. Okay, I'm going to introduce you to 3 of my first year students. Here we have Janine, Mandy, and Raul. Lovely students, hardworking, focused, I'm sure very similar to yourselves. Now, they're in their first semester and they're having to write an assignment. Janine is looking for a book that can help her develop those skills, those academic writing skills in writing her first assignment. Mandy explains, yes, she's new to uni. She's new to writing in English, and she wants some help with her first assignment. And Raoul, he's had a good look around and he can't find something simple and direct and easy to engage with to help him write this essay. There's lots of stuff out there, but he wants something that's precise, concise, something direct. And fortunately, here it is. It's the Concise Guide to Academic Writing. A short 24-page booklet that will provide these students, Janine, Mandy, and Raoul, and other students with direct understanding and support in developing their academic writing for writing their first assignment. A concise guide to academic writing. Now, if we look down the page at the bottom, we can see who wrote it. And yes, Dr. Paul Keble. So what does this booklet include? Let's have a look inside. Here's our content page, and we can have a quick look through all the elements that we think would be appropriate for writing quality text. Vocabulary, spelling, grammar, punctuation, style, all the way through referencing, paraphrasing, citing, all of those important elements of academic writing. So that's what's in it. Let's have a look at a bit of the actual context and content. So this is what it looks like. This is the page on reading and note-taking. Simple, straightforward. Here's spelling. Again, it's simple and straightforward, clear to see, clear to read, and includes links to external sources. Grammar. We all love grammar. And there it is, in a simple way to convey the ideas and concepts specifically around writing an academic essay. So we can see clearly that this booklet has all the elements required for a first-year student or an early academic student to engage in and to learn from, so they can develop those academic literacy skills to produce quality academic text. Now, it's been out there for a couple of years. Let's see what the feedback has been on this booklet. Astonishing, fantastic, extraordinary, amazing, incredible, wonderful. As a first-year student, this is perfect to help me with my writing. Can't recommend it more highly. Wow. So the feedback we've been getting for this booklet has been extremely positive. These are the comments that the students have provided me around this text. Finally, the question. Well, okay, it's a good text. How do I get it? Where is it? And of course, if I was pitching this, I would provide access to this text. Now, actually, it does exist. And Dr. Narita has a copy. So if you do want a copy, you can ask Dr. Narita and she will give it to you. Okay, so I've just pitched an idea. I've just pitched my book. What have I done in terms of preparing for this idea? What have I done? Well, first of all, as you saw clearly, I made sure that I understood my audience, my first-year students who are relatively new to academic writing. And I pitched the booklet to that audience. In the pitch, I made sure that I was clear about the main ideas within the context. Now, if you remember, I showed you the pages, the index and the pages for the elements that were in the book. So I made it very clear what the artifact has to offer. And I've tried to create a compelling story around its use. Who wants it? Why do they want it? Where can they get it? And I've created the visuals, to provide that impact to tell this story to you. So if we step back and think about those elements in relation to my presentation, my pitch, we can see clearly that those elements were there. Okay, so what do we need? We need a catchy introduction. We need to capture our audience. There we have a number of people sitting in front of us. We don't want to walk on the stage and, good morning. We want something that's powerful, that provides access to our concept, stimulate interest right from the beginning. We need to provide what value the artifact provides, the concept, the idea provides. What's the value there? We need to make that very clear. And we need to make sure that our audience understands where to go next. In your case, it's Dr. Nerida. So let's think about those steps more clearly. What we need to start with is that clear description, clear, concise description. We don't want to spend too much time. We want to be economic, but we do need to have all the elements there. So that start needs to be clear and concise and, as we've said, catchy. We need to know who our audience is, and we need to pitch to that audience. We then need to make sure they understand clearly why they need our product, our artifact, our idea. Then we want to capture them. We want to surround them in ideas, positivity. So we share our thoughts, our ideas, even where the product came from, how it was developed, why it was developed. We share with our audience, let them buy into our excitement, our enthusiasm. We also need some specifics. We need some evidence. Now, if you remember back to my pitch, I provided you feedback from the students. I won't say whether that's true or not, but let's not go there. But I gave that evidence to you as a part of my my claim. This is wonderful because my students say it's wonderful. So, of course, in a pitch, you would hope that there would be some ideas. Well, hang on a bit. Isn't that book a little bit short? But no, it's a concise book because that's exactly what our students want. They don't want to be burdened with 300 pages of text. As I said, they want something that's concise, they can get into and they can use immediately. So yes, we have to think about those potential objections and challenges, and we can build that into our presentation. Of course, we can also open to questions, and I think it's always a good idea to allow our audience to ask us those questions, but we must remember to be prepared to answer them. The worst thing is if you are given a challenge and you can't provide an idea or a concept that would balance that challenge, it could make you find yourself in a very difficult situation. So make sure you are very, very well prepared if you're going to open the floor to questions. Although I do think it's a good idea. Excuse me. And it's always great to make that conclusion. Let's finish the story. We like a whole story. So there are 6 steps that we need to consider in developing and preparing our presentation. Of course, you do need to practice. You really need to practice. Now, Patsy has got her friend who's willing to sit there and stand there and have a listen. And Patsy is speaking through her presentation to her friend. So if you can find somebody who's willing to sit down, stand up or whatever, and listen to you, it really is beneficial for you. There's so much that you can find out about your presentation. I would go as far, and I do this with my students, I would go as far as getting them to record themselves doing their presentation. If you video record yourself, you can see yourself, and you can be involved in a conversation with your colleague or colleagues around the presentation. But you can actually see. Often we present, and we're so in here in our presentations that we don't actually know what we're doing. So videoing ourselves perform really is helpful. I know sometimes it's a little bit embarrassing looking at yourself, but probably me more than you, but that's... So practice makes perfect. Always keep in the back of your mind, pitching is building relationships. You are building a relationship, constructive relationship with your audience. You need to consider your confidence. How are you portrayed? How are the audience seeing you? This again is why using a video is an important step, because you need to expound this confidence to your audience. They want fundamentally to believe in you. That's why they're there in the first place. They want to be a part of this. So you can show your belief in what you're pitching by showing that confidence, that enthusiasm, and that focus. So, body language is important. How we portray ourselves physically is a very important element to showing that enthusiasm and showing that confidence. Now here is some research that was conducted by Clark et al. And you can see this links to a journal article. I would recommend you have a look at this journal article and have a read through. And this talks about how using your body and gesturing is a very influential element to your presentations. So let's just see what the quote is. This is a direct quote from the text. Using gestures to depict and symbolize ideas has strong positive effects. Our findings indicate that the skilled use of gestures helps potential clients imagine aspects of a new venture for themselves, thereby enhancing perceptions of its potential. So this research is clearly indicating what we've already talked about this morning of how important it is to use body language to show that confidence in your product and in yourself. I do recommend you have a look at this, have a read through. It's a very interesting article. But bearing this in mind, what does it look like when we are performing? So, stand tall and look confident. That sort of shoulders back, chin up type approach, making sure that you are not slouched to one side or lying around on benches. Oh, now I can't hear anything. You're standing up straight and you try to keep your shoulders facing the audience. Now, if your audience are there, then you try to keep your shoulders parallel with your audience. Move it there. Of course, in some cases, may have to turn to show something, but generally, we try to keep our shoulders parallel with our audience. Making eye contact. Now, for me in this presentation today, it's not easy, as you can imagine, but if I'm presenting directly to an audience, I always try to make eye contact with every person in that room, even if it's for a split second. I consciously try to make eye contact with everybody in the room. Obviously, if you've got 120 people, it's going to be that much more difficult, but often we're working to groups of 20, 30, 40, and you can just quickly catch each person's eye. It's very powerful because that person immediately feels that you are talking to them directly. And if they have that feeling, they feel included, and you want to make them feel included. So, eye contact, if you can, try and make that eye contact with each person. Hands. These are important. They're quite useful too. Don't hide them. There's a psychological concept that if you're hiding your hands, you're hiding something. And we don't want to hide something. We want to be open to our audience. You will see many people, I'm not sure if you can see that, but they use this kind of approach, palms up. Again, palms up is a deep psychological concept that we have something to give. We are giving something. We're not taking it away, we're giving something. And again, in presentation terms, that's exactly what we're doing. We're giving our ideas and concepts. Smile. It's not easy sometimes. I know. You're quite often nervous. There's an awful lot going on in here. But if you can, without making it look too false, if you can, a smile works wonderfully. People like smiles. We're human beings. Human beings like smiles. It's a very positive element to communication. Finally, if you are presenting in a room, then moving around is a good idea. I personally, when I'm presenting, like even to go into the audience. I'm not saying that you need to do that, but movement is a good thing. You are taking the audience with you, with your movements across the stage, across the presentation area. You can even go into the audience for some reasons. Perhaps you are showing an artifact. So movement around the stage is engaging. Of course, and we'll come on to this next, there are some things that we have to be careful of. First of all, for some reason, you may like to look this up, but crossing arms, crossing legs, whether you're standing or sitting, seems to have a negative impact. It breaks the openness. Again, this is very deep psychological, neurological concepts of human communication, but try to avoid crossing arms. Crossing arms in front of you is a form of defense. You're actually building a wall between you and your audience. So again, it's something that you perhaps don't think about, but in our innate understanding of communication, as all humans have, it is a form of defense. Fidgeting, playing with something. Right. We are quite nervous if we're playing with something. It shows your nerves. Try not to play with something. Now, sometimes you'll have your notes. You may have your notes on your phone, which is okay. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as you don't read directly from the notes all the time. If you've got it there to help you, that's okay. But don't start playing with the phone or with the notes. Slouching, leaning, no. Using too much gesture can start to get freaky. It sounds like too much. Again, and moving around too much has the same effect. All of these things you can practice. You should practice. You should have a design in terms of your body language when you are preparing for your pitch. Okay. Using your voice effectively. Your voice is a very useful tool. Now, one of the biggest problems my students certainly have is they speak too quickly. Nerves and trying to remember everything means that they start to talk too quickly. I recommend you to speak about 80% of your normal speed. Now, I'm demonstrating this exactly in this presentation today. When I'm speaking, and if you heard me earlier on, you would notice that my speaking is a lot quicker than my presentation voice and my presentation speaking. So slow down, slow down. I also think, and this is something that many people don't do, you are going to be exercising muscles and sinews around your mouth to create sound in a way that you normally don't. And just like any physical sport or engagement, we have to warm ourselves up. And I highly recommend, and I got this from an actor friend of mine, to use R, E, U. Now, I know it feels weird, but try it. Stretch. Ah. Stretch your mouth. Ah. Ah. And then pull it wide, not with your hands, but with your muscles. E. E. And then pull everything together. Ooh. Look, I know it feels weird, and I know that it's very difficult, but have a go now. Have a go where you are now. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to practice. Ah, ah, e, e, ooh, ooh. Now, Dr. Narita is doing it beautifully, so you can see her modeling the process very, very well. Do it. I know it sounds, but in fact, it works. It works on a physical level, but it also, in fact, helps you psychologically just to calm yourself down a little bit. Okay. Visuals. A picture or a visual is worth 1,000 words. Absolutely. So, what do we have? We have our digital visuals, for example, our PowerPoint that I'm using now. You could also use artifacts or props, something that we actually take into the environment. So we have two forms of visuals to bring into our presentation. We have our PowerPoint, now I actually like PowerPoint. There are a few people that don't like it, but I think it's a really good tool if it's used well. Artifacts and props, something you take into the room. So, don't know why, but this is an artifact that I'm showing. It may have an app on here that I want to sell. I want to sell to my audience, and it's here, and I can show it. I can even give it. There, you can take it. You can touch it. Having that engagement with something physical, your audience will appreciate. You're not hiding anything. You're actually saying, here it is. Help yourself. Have a go. Next slide. I think you can get the point from that slide. Animation is useful, it can enhance, but you can overdo it and you will turn your audience off. In terms of text, if you are presenting words on your slide, there is a rule, a golden rule, never more than 7 lines of text and never more than 7 words a line. That's maximum. You can create something visually interesting with a lot less. Now, with a lot more, you lose your audience. Okay, now some of you may start reading that. Some of you looked at it and thought, nah, I'm not interested in reading that. Some of you are now not sure what to do because there's an awful lot of text. Some of you are working out, or am I going to listen to Paul, or am I going to read the text, or do I have to listen to the Paul and read the text at the same time, or what am I going to do? Help! And you have lost your audience. So please, you can read that later if you're interested. So if you are actually giving the audience, or if there's something that you want the audience to physically engage with, you have to decide, are you going to have one item? Are you going to have that one item on display in front of the audience? Are you going to invite the audience to experience that artifact before or after or during? Are you going to give the artifact to the audience to pass around? All of these are fine, absolutely fine, but make sure you know what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. Sometimes we can provide 2, 3, 4, 5 artifacts, the same, and they can be spread around. Now, an audience member engaging with an artifact, it won't be distractive. The positives outweigh the negatives. So they may be looking at it and maybe switching off for a second or two, but that's fine. That's okay. That works perfectly well. But again, come back to what we said before. Make sure you have planned what you're going to do. Make sure your audience understand how they're going to engage with the artifact. So that is my presentation for today. Do you have any questions? Let me just come out of here.
Okay, thank you so much, Paul. And thank you for the facial exercise earlier. I think I used to do that in drama class because in drama class we had to learn that. Otherwise, you won't be able to enunciate clearly, right?
That's right. Yeah, I'm glad. You're the first person I've spoken to who's actually heard of this before. So I'm very happy that it's the case.
My lecturer used to say that we have to make monkey expressions, something like that, because it's like you're making fun of yourself, right, in a way.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it sort of breaks down that feeling, that concern, those worries.
That's right.
Because it's such an embarrassing thing to do.
True. Okay, so students, now comes the time for you to ask questions to Dr. Paul Cabell, if you have any, because you are going to do the presentation, the second presentation after the mid-semester break. So just now, based on his explanation about idea pitching, would you like to ask him a question? Anything about the presentation? If you cannot unmute your microphone, you can also type in the chat box. Maybe we can give them some time because sometimes the students need to take their time to form the questions and all. If that's okay with you.
Of course it's okay. Absolutely.
Okay.
And if you have no questions, that's not a problem either. And you can, look, I'm always more than happy. If you want to contact me, you can through Dr. Norida, can ask those questions at another time. I'm more than happy to give you some advice or any advice.
Okay, so let's wait for the questions if you have any, or maybe even comments, not necessarily just a question. But actually, whatever you have presented just now, there are also some of the reminders I gave to my student. But even after giving them the reminder, they still did the same thing, like putting on too many words on the slides, and also talking about the gestures just now, like they were fidgeting. Um, Earlier you mentioned something about movement, right? Like you should move about, not just
Yeah.
stay still. But if let's say they have the presentation slide like right smack on the wall, then how should they control their movement, or how should they plan their movement?
I think it's a good idea to plan, you know, because once you're in the process, you tend to, if you haven't got any plans, physical plans, you know, you could either, often what happens is people just stand still, they don't move at all. So if you can think to yourself, okay, every 3 minutes or every 5 minutes, I'm going to move to one side of the stage and then move to the other side of the stage. That's the plan, and even perhaps have it as a note somewhere on your presentation. There's a message here from Mira. Is that right? Is it a good idea to attention getter every time when you think you'll lose? That's a very good point. Yes, I mean, I would say perhaps the first thing is that you would try to build your presentation in such a way that you're not going to have an issue around attention. But you know, things do happen in a presentation, and sometimes you get sidelined or something happens, and you can see that some of your audience perhaps are not as focused. Now, in my case, if I can see that a section of the audience, I will actually slowly kind of walk towards that group, and I would try to establish some kind of eye contact with them. So I will try to incorporate them quietly through my body language and my physical interaction with them to regain their attention. That's for a smaller group, but in some cases, you know, you have to think to yourself, okay, I'm going to pitch this idea. It's going to need a lot of explanation. So I need to build in to that explanation some way of reminding or keeping the attention of my audience. So I would suggest that planning is the most important thing. You can plan that to have elements within your presentation that make sure that you catch the audience if they're drifting away. So yeah, a lot of this is to do with planning. From Zarif, is it okay to refer to notes? Yes. Now, you may have your notes on your phone or paper or whatever. It's completely up to you, a tablet. It's fine, except you've got to make sure that it's minimal. You know, I've had some students presenting and they're literally doing this. They're speaking actually to their phone. That's an example of the poorest example. But there's nothing wrong with, you know, taking your attention here for a second or two just to catch up and then back to the audience. That's absolutely fine. Of course, not too much. We do try to learn as much as we can, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with having your prompt in your hand and referring to it now and again. It's normal and totally acceptable. Good question.
Okay, thank you very much, Zarif. Oh yeah.
Okay, sorry, Ms. Sofwa. If I may interrupt, no, more like I'm just adding a comment into what Paul just said. It's completely fine and okay for the students to be referring to their cue cards, notes, or the phone. But what makes it not okay would be like what you mentioned before, like overly reading from the notes, or blatantly so crystal clear that you do not memorize your text. That would definitely affect how you are going to be evaluated. It is okay to refer to those things, but don't overdo it. I think this is
Yes,
something that
yes.
they need to keep in mind, because as we read, usually we tend to subconsciously switch into our reading mode. Then our intonation may tend to be monotonous. because we're supposed to be speaking in a way that will be engaging and interesting to the audience. So along with that, I also have one question for you, Paul, if you don't mind,
I don't mind.
because student, you do mind? You don't. You're just kidding. Okay, you're kidding, right?
I'm kidding, yes. You, Dr. Narida, you know me well enough.
I hope so. So going back to my question, most of the students are familiar with how to come up with attention getters because we've been teaching them how to attract the audience attention and whatnot at the beginning of their presentation. But they will also be assessed towards the end of their presentation under the closing component, where the closing part will need to be just as effective as the introduction to make sure that the presentation was done effectively and smoothly. So how do they go about in producing an effective closing for their speech?
For their speech. So this is excluding the question answer session, I presume.
Mm,
So what we need is a dynamic summary.
okay.
So this is the idea that I'm pitching. I've introduced it. I've provided all of the elements that support its use or its development or whatever the idea may be. What we need is a clear, concise summary of everything that's come before. That should happen, and I'm talking about 30, 40 seconds, no more. It needs to be a concise summary of everything that we've said. And now, again, back to planning. That should be built into the plan. Okay, this is my conclusion. This lasts 30 seconds. I've got all of the elements that I've talked about, and I have it in a dynamic and engaging way. I provide it and even having a visual, to support that final closure. But yeah, you're absolutely right. We do need to have that summary, and it should be a summary of everything that's come before, but it needs to be sharp and concise.
Okay. If let's say in between their presentation, the students were to say, "Are you with me? Any questions?" Or simply just reaching out to some of the audience just to make sure that people are focusing onto him or her throughout the presentation. Will that be considered something that you would say as an effective skill to have for the presentation?
Now, I think that's a very important point to make, because you as a presenter, you need to decide how much interaction there will be between you and the audience. Now, some presenters will say up front, I will be open to questions at the end of the session, which kind of means, okay, for the next 30 minutes, you're going to listen to me. That's one way. The second way is to build in to the presentation 2 or 3 questions, or in my case, I use the REU bit to try to engage my audience. So building something into it specifically, you have to be careful. Or, sorry, let's do the third one. The third one is to say upfront, I'm happy to answer any questions as I present. So you've got 3 layers of interaction. The third one is the most difficult, and you've really got to be on top of your material if you're going to allow those questions to come up during your presentation, because they can be quite confusing or difficult in terms of you and your presentation. So you have to make that decision up front. But I can't see anything wrong, and I think, in fact, it's quite a good idea to think of tasks through the presentation, whether it's question and answer or whether it's response. To be honest, with this presentation today, I did have a response section that would have required our students to respond digitally using their phones. Now, when I tried it last night, I wasn't happy that it was as smooth as it ought to be, so I pulled it out. It needs to be working perfectly. It would have allowed you, the audience, to answer a question or some questions and the software, the app would have given us the response, your response on the screen. And I really like that. I really like that way of engaging our audience. But we have to make sure that it's working, because the worst thing is if it doesn't work, you know, you lose your audience. Last night I trialed it. I wasn't happy with it, so I pulled it out. But yes. So again, building these things into the presentation, I think, is really important. But making sure we have control over what happens is also equally important.
Thank you, Paul. Engaging as usual. Very informative. Thank you so much. And we have another question there in the chat box from a student.
Yeah. Is it okay to be informal during our pitching, like making jokes? Oh, a very good question, because it's very much who you are. You know, in a presentation, you need to develop these competencies, but it's you, it's your personality. Now, in my terms, I like making people laugh. I enjoy it, so it's part of my character. So I can have that informality, and I can use jokes. I think it can work really well, but you have to have the confidence to be able to do it, to use it. It's great. I like it. I certainly like it. When my students present to me, and if they can make me smile, then, you know, they've passed. Yay! Using slang. I would be careful with slang. Yeah. If you are referring to something specific and you are narrating, then you could use slang. But I would say probably not, in terms, because you want the respect of your audience, and using slang can erode that respect. So you have to be. I would not use it, unless it's linked specifically to a joke or a part of humor, but it's sort of externally presented in a way as a narrative. Then you could, but be very, very careful. And ultimately, I would say joking is fine as long as it's not too much, as long as it's designed, as long as it's built into the presentation. Using slang, no, I think it's probably a good idea not to. But good question.
Okay. So to the students, you may want to reflect on your previous presentations, you know, think about what worries you had back then, and what are the things that you feel like you should improve on, and that's what you can ask Dr. Paul here. Okay, we have another question. What kind of effective mindset can we adopt when we experience a loss of focus or idea during a presentation? And sometimes you feel nervous. And I think just now you mentioned about you testing out the poll, because you had a poll in your original presentation, right? And then you decided to take it out.
That's right.
So sometimes we have plans for something, we've tried and tested, but the moment we present, let's say in class, suddenly there's a technical issue. So somehow we weren't able to proceed with our original plan. So then we get, you know, we lost our focus, like what the student is asking right here.
Yeah.
Mm.
Look, it's not that easy to overcome for everybody. You know, these sort of issues do come up. In my case, I will apologize and sort of smile. You know, suggest that this is things that happens to all of us at some time. So I'm really sorry. I would love to have used that, but we're going to have to press on. Now, at that point, we're going to have to press on. I will sort of quietly take a deep breath, a good 5-second deep breath, just to calm myself down. That deep breath works wonders. Physiologically, that deep breath works wonders. It allows you to calm down, the adrenaline to dissipate. The adrenaline is the element that makes you nervous and go off. So just taking that deep breath. You don't have to show it. You don't have to stand in front of the audience and go, just sort of quietly do it for 4 or 5 seconds, and then okay, let's proceed. Even if you learn a stock phrase that for this kind of incidents, then that's absolutely. Look, your audience is fundamentally on your side, so an apology works very, very well. Let's move on. They will understand. Don't worry. They have been in those situations themselves, so try not to make it impact you. But physiologically, that deep breath, 4 or 5 seconds, works wonders.
I agree. And I think sometimes we forgot to be human when
Well,
we are
right.
right, because we feel like it's not okay for us to make mistakes. It's not okay for us to appear nervous, and we think that people are judging us, and that the moment we make one single mistake, and that's it.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that is probably the mindset that we should adopt when we are
Yeah.
presenting.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Sunu. Yep. Sorry, Paul, did I interrupt you earlier? You were saying
No,
something just now? No.
I
Okay.
can't. If I was, I'd forgotten what I was saying.
Yeah, I mean, we're not robots. We're not computers. Even robots can have glitches. What more human, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So any other question from the students? If you would like to speak to Paul directly, go ahead. You won't find an Australian here on the campus. So if you want to talk to Paul, please go ahead and speak directly to him. Anyone? I actually had a question earlier, but while I was listening to you, I forgot what it was. What was it again? It was about the technical issue first. Yeah. Speaking of referring to notes, I mean, you are aware that, and being someone who has taught in Malaysia, you know that English is not our first language, and for most of our students here, it's not even actually their second language. Maybe they don't really speak the language at home. So that's why when they have to do the presentation, they rely so much on their notes because it's difficult to memorize the speech. So
Sure.
yeah, that's why you depend on the notes. Do you have any advice that you can give them?
Well, I think when you have English as an additional language, one of many languages, and look, having lived in Malaysia, I know that most Malaysians, if not all, are very competent English users. But to a certain extent, if you are functioning in another language, you may have to rely on learning the text. Like I said, preparation is everything. Preparation is everything. Too many people think that, okay, I'll do the PowerPoint and I'll be okay. It's just not. The preparation takes hours and hours and hours. Now, if you're functioning in English as an additional language, it may be the case that you will have to start rote learning, actually learning portions of the text. Now you may find it depends on your competencies and how comfortable you feel using English, but in some cases you can learn the first sentence, say, of each section, and once you've got that kind of provides you a confidence to start expanding on that sentence. So it may be a matter of learning, say, 15 sentences through the presentation, but allowing yourself an idea. Now, fundamentally, that's what I've done today. I mean, I do this, and I've been doing this for years, but I still have to prepare extensively, and exactly that. So in my mind, I've got certain sentences from this presentation today. Sorry, I'm doing this because I've got another screen here where it is. So I've learned through my presentation for today, I've learned certain elements of that presentation, knowing that once I've used that sentence, I can expand, and I feel confident to expand on that notion. And I'm sure if you analyze my presentation today, we will still pick up, even though English is my only language, embarrassingly, even though I had lessons in Bahasa, but I can't rely on my ability to order anything other than nasi lemak. It, you know, those sentences that I've learnt allows me to expand on those concepts and quite naturally. So I think students who have English as an additional language still need to learn, or will need to learn, elements of the presentation, and it depends on their own confidences on how they can expand on those sentences themselves. And again, practicing and videoing the practice will allow those students to understand what they can and what they can't do. But yeah, there will be a certain element of learning.
Okay, and I think it's important that we start simple. Don't prepare like too long of a speech. Use mostly simple sentences so that it's easier for us to remember, to memorize.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. There's nothing wrong, and I think also students confuse complex sentencing with deep understanding, which is not true. A simple sentence that can explain a deep complex a complex concept is far better than a complex sentence that do, you know. So these simple direct sentences, particularly in presentation language, works much better than complex sentences. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Okay. So do we have any other questions from the lecturers or even from the students?
There's a hand up.
It's me.
There's a hand up? Oh, sorry.
Yes, mine. Okay. I have two questions. So one is related to visual aids, and the other one is related to the actual presentation. The questions I have, these are the marking guidelines for the students' presentation, and I find these are the two elements that students may not be able to score quite well. So perhaps you can share some tips for them to be better at this. Okay, so the first one is about visual aids. How comprehensive, for lack of a better word, I can't think of a better word for this, but how comprehensive do you think it should be? Because when we say, oh, you should have at least 3 slides for your presentation, and students prefer just 3 slides, and the 3 slides don't necessarily reflect whatever they are presenting. They could have moved on to a different content, but the slides remain on things that they have previously presented, for example, or the previous point. So how comprehensive should the presentation slides be? So that's the first question. The second question would be in terms of vocalizing their pauses and fillers. So I find that this is something that most students do, which I understand because I do this as well. But perhaps you could give some tips on how they can be better at managing their pauses and their fillers. Okay, that's all from me.
Very good questions, and I like the idea that you think I can remember 2 questions at the same time. So the first one, in terms of the visuals, you're right. Some students try to build too much into a visual, and it overwhelms the audience. Now, if you have a lot to show, and if it's over stages, then I highly recommend you to build the slide. So the first slide shows this bit, the second slide shows this bit plus this bit, the third slide shows that plus that plus that, and we're building the picture. So it enables the audience to clearly define the elements, each of the elements in the visual. We're not overpowering the audience with one huge visual. We're building the picture, and ultimately we'll have a complex picture, or whatever it might be, a complex visual. But because we built it element by element, slide by slide, it helps you as the presenter align what you're saying to the construction of the visual. And secondly, by the end of the presentation, or that element of the presentation, and the visual that you have created, the audience will clearly understand each of the elements and how they relate to each other. So that facility in PowerPoint is very, very useful. You know, one slide after the other, and finally, and this is one of the issues in terms of assessing students that we have to think about, because if we limit their use of slides, it can limit their ability to create these complex visuals stage by stage. So we also have to think about both encouraging our students to understand and use that concept, but also allowing our students to build something that is visually engaging. The second question, I've completely forgotten. What was it?
Localizing fillers and pauses.
That's right, that's right. Again, this is a natural thing. Now, I said earlier in my presentation that we should be speaking 80% of our normal speaking speed. And in fact, if we practice that carefully, it will help. And I'm trying to demonstrate it now in the way that I'm responding to you. It will help to alleviate those periods of thinking about the word. So I've just demonstrated. It's a natural thing. And I think students, if they're speaking more slowly, these spaces are not so important. And it's just a part of human communication. I use it, we all use it. But if we speak at 80% of our normal speed, it will cut at least 50% of those pauses. So again, in the practicing of the presentation, we make sure that we are timing our speaking appropriately.
And I think that gives us time to think as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Think of what to do next, not just simply sticking to our original plan.
I've just, although nobody's asked this, but it's just come up into my mind. I'm not sure whether anybody's noticed, but when you're presenting digitally, this is something through theatre, but or online. My eldest daughter is a TikTok influencer, and she teaches me these things. Looking at the camera. So I'm now looking directly at the camera in my laptop, and in doing so, I'm hoping that it looks like I'm looking at you. You know, of course I'm not. I can't see anything but a little black dot. But doing this actually helps to encourage interaction between me, digitally, me as a presenter and the audience. Anyway, that's just something that came to my mind while I was talking then.
Yeah, I guess sometimes we forget where the camera is. Actually, now that you've mentioned it, I was like, oh yeah, I wasn't looking into the camera at all. In fact, I was looking at the screen directly at you. I thought I was looking at you.
That's what we naturally do. And it's very difficult not to do it. I mean, I'm having to flick between the camera and you now because it's human. It's the human need to be able to interact in that way.
Yep,
But
that's right.
So it's difficult. But yeah, if you're Anyway, it's something to think about.
And there are also some who, while they were presenting, they were too nervous. They can barely look at their friends. I mean, the audience. Or sometimes they'll just look at one direction. I mean, even though there's no band One Direction there, but they're just looking at that one particular direction where their friends are sitting at. How do they build the confidence to, like, at least practice their eye contact?
It's a very difficult thing. Some people, as we know, will be much more comfortable in using their eye contact than others. You're absolutely right. I can picture now students staring at something on the wall, and too frightened to take their eyes. But in fact, their eyes may be facing that way, but they're actually looking inwards, not outwards. It comes with practice. It's to consciously one of the things that I think I'm at fault, and a lot of us as lecturers are at fault, is we don't teach. We tell our students to do a presentation. Okay, go and do a presentation, but we don't actually teach them how to do the presentation and how to develop these presentation skills. Like any skills, it takes an awful lot of practice and time to develop these skills. So running classes and encouraging, for example, if I'm presenting here, and sorry, but I can see 4 people. If you were my colleagues, and I'm going to present, maybe I would say, please, could you come into this room? One of you sits there, one sits there, one sits there, one sits there. I just want to practice my eye contact with each of you in that room. So getting the students to do something as simple as that, find a space, you know, and have four students sitting in different positions, and getting them to have a very simple presentation, a piece of text, and then looking at the different people, just practicing.
Okay, yeah, I think we should remind them that because we are used to it, sometimes we forget to actually show it.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Or we just don't have time.
Yep, that's right. Okay, so I think we've been here for like over an hour already, and I think the students have had a lot of input from you. Thank you very much. If I may pitch you an idea, since you have a very wonderful book with that academic writing, perhaps you can try an AI to redesign your book. Just to make it look more attractive. Just an idea.
Okay, I will.
Okay, so I would like to invite Dr. Nomala to close the session. If the students have no more questions, then I think we can probably wrap things up. Dr. Nomala?
Hello, hi Paul. How are you?
Hi. Very good, thank you.
Okay. Now before I close, I've got one question actually, and it is about the challenges of choosing a topic for the pitching session for the students. You know that in your slides you talk about how like persuading others to buy into a vision, like a new product, service, you know, like ideas. But some students they have problems choosing a topic, so they sometimes talk about existing a product, for example. So they talk about, oh, online shopping, for instance, but we've got online shopping now. So it's not really, for me, like that can attract the audience, because the idea is not really like innovative or creative, for example. So what do you think about this, Paul? I mean, guidelines or tips on choosing the topic?
So I think, of course, we want our students to be comfortable with pitching something. So my immediate reaction would be, okay, online shopping as a topic we can work with, but we want value added. So what can you add to, what innovation could you add to this that would engage like you and your friends, the student and her friends or his friends? You know, so value added. Something that they have a passion for is great. There's nothing wrong with that, I think, at all. But you're completely right. We don't want to be sold something that is already there. So we need that plus. So having that value added element, and you know, it could be anything. It was up to them then to think of what they could add to that. And I think that could work very well. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for Paul. So actually, I'm on the right track, because some students are giving me, you know, like simple topic like that. Then I say, okay, what's unique about yours? I mean, something, yeah, because otherwise, you know, like something we have already known. So it's kind of, you know, like maybe the audience is not interested anymore, you know, like to listen to throughout the presentation. Okay. So thank you again, Dr. Paul, for answering the questions. Like we've got a lot of questions actually, and for the great presentation. It was indeed a pleasure and a great honor to have you with us. And I actually really enjoyed your presentation, because your pace, you know, like it's really good for the students. You know how the students, you know, because Malaysians, sometimes students have problems listening to like Australian accent. So it's very good that you know, like I really like it, the way you pace your voice and all that. Thank you very much for your understanding. We would definitely welcome the opportunity to have you again with us in the future. And for the students, I hope you have enjoyed this informative presentation, learned the do's and the don'ts when pitching an idea. And so this concludes the webinar. Paul, I hope that one day maybe we can, you know, have this kind of session again, different topic maybe. Yeah. Yeah. And to all others, thank you for attending. Thank you for your patience throughout the session. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure. Very nice to meet you and your students.